Last night, I finished The Last of Us, Episode 9 finale. So many emotions with this one. Everything that Joel and Ellie have been through for the better part of a year all comes to a head in this one. For anyone who's played the game, we all know what it is, and we know exactly what kind of future implications it's going to have going forward in the future. I'm already seeing debates of whether or not Joel should have actually done what he did in this one. It's the mark of not just a great game, but a great piece of art. If it can keep people talking, you're doing something right. For anyone who's new here, thank you guys so much for joining in. I've had such a great time talking about each episode of The Last of Us. These last couple months watching the show being adapted has made me appreciate the game so much more, and it makes me even more excited to see what they're going to do with Part 2. For anyone who hasn't played the games, Part 2 especially, since we have yet to see how they're going to adapt it, don't worry, I won't go into specifics about what happens in that plot. For anyone who has, well, you'll know what I'm talking about. So episode 9, titled Look for the Light, Joel and Ellie are now in Salt Lake City and in the abandoned quarantine zone looking for the Fireflies. But to backtrack a little bit, the episode opens with a flashback to Ellie's mother, Anna, who's played by the one and only Ashley Johnson, who was Ellie in the original games. I waited an entire season to see how they were going to bring her in here, and calling it meta is putting it lightly, but the genetic connection, if you will, that she has to Bella Ramsey's Ellie, I find that extremely poetic. It opens up with Anna running through a forest outside of Boston, on the run from an infected person. She barricades herself in the house, the infected breaks in, she gets into a scuffle and kills it, but then it's revealed that she got bit. And in this, I think in a way, explains how Ellie was immune, because she did sort of pass on those infected genetics, hence why Ellie never turned after she got bit in the mall while hanging out with Riley. I listened to the Inside the Episode podcast, and Neil Druckmann said that he had this idea in mind for so many years. Wanted to make it an animated short, a live action short, but certain things fell through and it never came to fruition. When he brought it up to the creators, Craig Mazin said, "We're doing that. That is an absolute must." Marlene and some of her fellow Fireflies find Anna in this abandoned house, and she's getting this close to becoming infected. She gives Ellie to Marlene, saying, "Please find somebody that's going to take care of her and look after her for me." Marlene isn't really sure that she wants to kill Anna, but knows that she's got no other option. Nobody wants to go out as an infected. I mean, Tess said in the original game, "I will not turn into one of those things." And to be honest, I wouldn't want to either. Little details that I absolutely adore is when Anna says to Ellie,
"Yeah, you tell her. You tell Nellie."
like mother, like daughter. Ashley Johnson has said in various interviews that she is in a lot of ways like Ellie. Seeing how she plays Anna in this episode, such a perfect fit. Then we jump into the present. Ellie is noticeably more quiet than usual, and Joel is a big chatterbox. It's a really sad reversal of what we had before in earlier episodes. Ellie's a chatterbox, she wants to bond with Joel. He doesn't want anything to do with her. After all that stuff that happened with David in the winter season, she's traumatized by it. Not mad at Joel at all. She's just never been through this kind of experience before in her life, and she doesn't know how to process it. He tries to liven it up a little bit with like telling a joke or saying, I actually found some dynamite back in that RV. Really? No. I was kidding. But it's when she sees the giraffe roaming around outside that we get to see a glimmer of what she used to be before David. And Joel has this calming reassurance in his face, thinking, okay, she's gonna be fine. In the original game, when I first played this, seeing that giraffe, absolute shock. I could not believe what I was seeing. It's still as heartwarming as it was 10 years ago. And this is where Joel and Ellie start to really cement their bond with each other. They dance around saying, "I love you," or that I care about you, but it is pretty clear between the two. And then we get another moment where Joel reveals what exactly happened when he got shot in the head. He shot himself. Right after Sarah died, he didn't know if he could live without her, but he flinched and he missed.
So time heals all wounds, I guess.
It wasn't time that did it.
I would say time in a way does heal things, but mostly it makes things fade. People are what really heal you from something that you had before. I've seen it in various people who experience a breakup of some kind, and then they meet somebody else who's a lot better for them, and it helps them process their own emotions that they're still dealing with deep down inside. Or sometimes when you lose a pet and then you get another one, you're able to process those feelings that you still have over that situation. There's other countless examples too, but it is true. Living beings, human beings in this case, they're able to help you heal from what you had before. In this situation, Joel spent the better part of 20 years being closed off from everybody, except for Tommy and Okay, maybe Tess. But losing his only child at the hands of another human being and seeing how far humanity fell off the map with the infected, the raiders, militia groups, the corrupt military and government that tried really hard to contain the outbreak, he lost all hope. And outside of those other two people I mentioned, he didn't want to have any kind of emotional connection with anybody. Ellie, on the other hand, gets through to him, and as he says to her in his own way, you helped me regain my humanity. You helped me realize that I still have it in me to be a good person. Which goes all the way back to episode 3 with Bill and Frank. You are my purpose. I don't want to have life without you ever again. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically the gist of what he said. And that's the central theme of this whole story. Are you really willing to live in a world without the person that you love the most? We saw that with Henry and Sam, Bill and Frank. Joel lost Tess, but Ellie was still there to help anchor him down into the ground. When it comes to changes, there's not really that many. They basically stick to the main plot line through and through. We do have the one infected that Anna fought earlier in the episode, but in the game, Joel and Ellie go through the sewer tunnels and they find bloaters and clickers and runners. We don't get that in this one. And when they go through that abandoned field hospital that was active during the early days of the outbreak, Ellie shows Joel the picture of him and Sarah from many years ago. At that moment in the game, he's able to process finally the death of his own daughter. That's nowhere to be seen in this episode, and honestly, I don't really care. I think the change that they went with in this one, even though it's a small one, it still hits home. And as Ellie is telling these jokes, the way the Fireflies ambush them, the way they just snuck up behind them like that, I said out loud, oh, look, behind you! Joel wakes up in the hospital where he sees Marlene and a couple other Fireflies guarding the room. And it's the moment where Joel realizes that Ellie's being prepped for surgery, and the only way to get the infection out of her is to dissect her brain. Yeah. We all know what happens with that. And then he goes medieval on every single Firefly that he runs into until he finds Ellie. We've seen hints of what Joel can do when someone that he loves the most is threatened. This whole sequence is enthralling. Almost kind of reminded me of the little bits that I've seen of the action sequences from John Wick. Just a little disclaimer, I've never actually seen any of the John Wick movies, but I am planning on watching them in preparation for the fourth one. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Embodying John Wick, Clint Eastwood, and Rambo all in one. And at one point, a Firefly drops his weapon and he shoots him unarmed. Because if he turns his back on him, odds are that guy's gonna pick up his gun and shoot him. Then he gets to the operating room. The surgeon threatens him with a knife, and he kills him. And just a little tidbit here, the one nurse, that's Laura Bailey, who from what I've heard, had two small parts in the first game. The news reporter in the opening, and one of the nurses in the end of the first game. And now here she is doing the exact same thing. And she also went on to play Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. God, oh my God, oh. That shot of the dead surgeon on the floor. Just you wait, guys, just you wait. Picks up Ellie, runs her out of the building, gets confronted by Marlene in the garage, but he decides, no, you're not taking her. And he kills Marlene. She begs for her life and says,
You'd just come after her.
which is true. She definitely would have. Really happy that the creators didn't try to make any big changes, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Real quick before we get to the final scene, without spoiling anything, I've mentioned Abby a couple times in these episodic reviews. She's an important character in The Last of Us Part 2. For anyone who isn't familiar with the game, I'm not going to say what it is. I will say this. She actually was in this hospital during this sequence. We find that out in Part 2. I was watching these scenes like a hawk, looking for some kind of silhouette in the background to maybe see her hair or her ponytail, or maybe hear a mention of her name, something, anything. Or maybe just one shot at her from a distance where she says hi or whatever. Or maybe she was kind of in the background. I don't know. Maybe some guys like New Rockstars or Screen Crush could point that out. But I guess maybe it's better to just leave it in the background and reveal it as the story goes on. We're gonna get her eventually. Don't you worry, guys. But as it was in the original game, when Ellie wakes up in the car as Joel is driving back to Jackson, she asks what happened, and he lies to her, saying, actually, there's a lot more like you. They ran some tests. Nothing happened. They've stopped looking for a cure. We're going back to Jackson. To say that Ellie was disappointed, that's putting it lightly. Now, as far as should Joel have done what he did or should he not have done what he did, is there really a right or wrong answer in this scenario? Honestly, there isn't. But if it were me, I probably would have done the same thing if I were him. If I spent the better part of a year bonding with this young kid and found out that she was basically being taken to a slaughterhouse, you can bet my bottom dollar they are not going to take Ellie away from me. That is not happening. At the time of the first game, people say that Joel basically condemned humanity, and I'm sure that people who haven't played the game are probably saying the exact same thing here. But the thing with this cordyceps, they don't really delve into the science of this whole thing. All they really tell you that it's possible that they can make a cure with this. Is it a certainty? Is it a definite? No, it's not. I said this in my review of the original game a few years ago. There would probably have to be a lot of research that would go into studying this thing, understanding it, trial and error. So much research and development would have to go into figuring out how to stop this thing. And in a world where there's limited resources and supplies, or bare minimum, the chances of a cure probably aren't going to work. And even if it was possible, logistically speaking, distributing it out to the population, that's a whole nother problem entirely. And even if there's no morally correct choice in this scenario, it's still a selfish decision on Joel's part, but very, very few people can fault him for what he did. The vast majority of people would actually say that he was justified in what he did because he already lost one child 20 years ago to the whims of another human being who was trying to do what was best for humanity. He was not about to go through that again, because if he didn't save her, he'd never be able to live with himself. It's a choice he has to live with, but it's one he never regrets. So they end up hiking back to Jackson after their car breaks down, and before they could continue on their way, she tells Joel about Riley, how she was the first to die from getting infected, then it was Tess, and then Sam, and that she's still waiting for her turn.
Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
There's a whole lot of ways you could read Ellie's emotions, but I think it is pretty clear she knows on some level deep down he's lying to her. Because of how much she looks up to him like a father and how much she cares for him and loves him, she's willing to put it aside. Well, for now at least. Without knowing where the story goes, you could probably imagine she tries to bring it up with him again a couple times afterward. She feels like trying to help find a cure was a way to correct a lot of the stuff that she did. Now she feels like that opportunity's been taken away from her, and she's trying to wrestle with this deep down. Joel, why did you take me away from there? What happened back there? Wow, there is so much stuff that you could pull from this whole ending entirely. Without knowing where exactly the story goes, whether or not Joel was correct in what he did, or if Ellie would have sacrificed herself for the greater good, were the Fireflies justified in thinking that a cure was possible? There's so many different ways you can interpret this. And I just have to give a round of applause for everybody that was involved. Cast, crew, Neil Druckmann for having a creative voice, not letting any questionable creative choices go through like what you see with most video game to live action adaptations. This season was absolutely as perfect as I wanted it to be. And I was really scared with how they were going to handle this going in. And by the time it was over last night, I just had to stand up and walk around with a giant smile on my face because, yeah, there are no words. It's been a really fun experience seeing people react to the show for the first time, whether they are fans of the games or if they haven't played the games at all. At my job, I know a couple of people who are watching the show and they're not familiar with the games at all. They don't play video games that much, but they'll ask me questions like, did that happen in the game or did it happen this other way? And I'll explain it to them as best as I can without revealing too much about part 2. I kind of joke with them saying, oh, well, so when Ellie does, oh, no, I'm just kidding. And they go, don't you dare tell me anything. And now I actually know how some of my friends feel who are big book readers when they see one of their favorite books being adapted into a show or a movie. Although in this situation, I cannot say that the game is better than the show. Even in that case, to compare these two things together, Season 1 of The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 1, I don't really think that's fair to compare those two because each one of them is very different while also very similar at the same time. In a lot of ways, I think they complement each other. Now, when I think of The Last of Us, I don't have to think of just the game. I can also think of the TV show. When I think of Joel and Ellie, I won't just think of Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson. I'll think of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. It's one of those rare cases of anything in life that you can have both. As far as what they're going to do with Part 2, from what I'm hearing, the creators are saying that it's going to take more than one season to adapt it. That, I think, is a smart idea because the scope of the narrative of Part 2 is massive. From the perspectives of both Ellie and Abby, there is so much ground to cover that to condense it all into 9 episodes, there's not enough time for that. So I think if anything, if you're going to adapt it, make it at least 3 seasons. Or maybe 4 if you have to. I don't know. And I know some of you guys who follow me aren't fans of Part 2 and you're just going to tap out because of what's coming in Part 2. I don't blame any of you for feeling that way. If I were in your position, I'd probably be saying the same thing. But as someone who really loves Part 2, I am so excited to see how they translate it into this medium. And I cannot wait to see what kind of changes they'll bring and how they're going to interpret certain moments and certain scenes and how they... No spoilers, never mind. So those are my thoughts on episode 9 of The Last of Us. Really sad that it's over, but also really, really happy that it turned out the way it did. And I cannot wait to see what they bring into the next season. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are in this episode and what's your favorite episode of this whole season so far. If I had to pick one, oh man, I don't know. I'll have to think about that actually. Maybe I'll do a ranking of each episode. Well, no, I don't think I want to do that. I only do rankings for certain things. I'll think about my favorite episode. I might bring it up in a future video one day. So, anyway, thanks again guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.